So, imagine you're watching a massive, heavily armed corporate monopoly just violently bulldozing your entire hometown.
Oh, wow. Yeah, that's a terrifying image.
Right. And like as you're watching the machinery tear down the houses of all your neighbors, you realize something even worse.
With
The
this.
local judges and the politicians, they aren't even trying to stop it.
Ah,
Yeah, they're actively helping the corporation. They're, manipulating zoning laws, foreclosing on properties just so they can buy up the cheap real estate for themselves.
which is sadly something that probably sounds a little too familiar to a lot of people.
Exactly. But the crazy thing is, that is not the plot of some modern dystopian thriller. That is the exact historical and economic reality that birthed the Book of Micah.
It really is.
Welcome to the deep dive, by the way. Today, our source material is this incredibly comprehensive document. It's titled Survey of the Book of Micah by Chris R. Velasquez.
And, this survey, it really forces us to look at this ancient text through a very gritty socioeconomic lens.
Yeah, it's not pulling any punches.
No, not at all. It demands that we stop treating the Hebrew prophets like abstract philosophers, right?
Mm-hmm.
And start looking at them as boots on the ground witnesses to basically systemic collapse.
Right, which is exactly our mission today. We are going to decode the history, the archaeology, and the Hebrew linguistics behind Micah.
Which is so needed.
It is, because we want to rescue this text from feeling like, just some intimidating, dusty pamphlet.
Yeah.
We want to reveal it for what it actually is to you, the listener, a fiercely relevant 2,800-year-old exposure of geopolitical pressure, economic exploitation, and systemic corruption.
But to do that, we kind of need to understand where Micah sits in the broader library of the ancient world first, right?
Yeah, setting the stage. Let's do it.
So Micah is the sixth book of what is canonically called the Prophets of the 12.
Right, the minor prophets.
Exactly. And in Jewish and Christian tradition, these 12 books, ranging from Hosea to Malachi, they're often read as a unified corpus.
They aren't just isolated works.
Right, they're in constant dialogue with each other. And Micah, in particular, he's basically synthesizing the messages of the prophets around him.
How so? Like, what is he pulling from the others?
Well, he takes the searing denunciation of social oppression that you find in Amos.
Amos was huge on social justice.
Yes, exactly. And he combines it with the deep, almost visceral cry against covenant betrayal that you find in Hosea.
Wow. So it's like a theological mashup.
It is. He proves that religious hypocrisy and social injustice are just inextricably linked. You can't have one without the other.
Okay, so we really cannot understand Micah's critique of his own people without first understanding the geopolitical pressure cooker that shaped his entire world.
Absolutely not. The context is everything.
So let's look at the external threat first. We are sitting in the late 8th century BCE. And the source makes it really clear that everything happening in Judah at this time is a reaction to one terrifying reality.
Right. The Neo-Assyrian Empire.
Just the name sounds intimidating.
And they were. Under the rule of Tiglath-Pileser III, Assyria underwent this massive transformation.
What kind of transformation?
Well, before his reign, empires might launch a campaign in the spring, raid some territory, take some loot, and then, go home.
Like seasonal warfare.
Exactly. But Tiglath-Pileser III, he changed the actual mechanics of ancient warfare. He created a massive standing professional army.
Which was a game changer.
Huge. They didn't just raid anymore. They methodically conquered, annexed, and entirely reorganized the ancient Near East.
So the analogy that comes to mind is like that ruthless corporate monopoly we mentioned earlier, but armed with siege rams and battering rams.
That's a great way to picture it.
They are just reshaping the map by liquidating entire nations.
And their primary tool for pacification was, well, it was horrific. It was mass deportation.
Oh, man.
Yeah. When they conquered a region, they would forcibly uproot the elite, the artisans, the farmers, and just march them hundreds of miles away to another part of the empire.
That is so calculated.
It was a deeply psychological and demographic tactic, right? To obliterate national identity and prevent any kind of organized rebellion.
Just break their spirit completely.
Exactly. And the source gives us the timeline of this terror. And so the northern kingdom of Israel, with its capital in Samaria, had been really struggling under this Assyrian pressure.
Right.
And finally, in 721 BCE, Samaria falls completely. The Assyrians breach the walls, and the northern kingdom is effectively just erased from the map through mass deportation.
Which means the nation sitting right next door, the southern kingdom of Judah, is suddenly completely exposed. Like the buffer state is just gone.
Judah is thrust right onto the front lines.
Hmm.
And during Micah's ministry, Judah is ruled by the succession of kings Jotham, Ahaz, and Hezekiah.
Right.
And they are desperately trying to navigate this impossible survival scenario.
So what do?
They are forced into vassalage treaties, which means they have to pay absolutely crippling annual tribute to Assyria just to keep the imperial army from marching south and destroying Jerusalem.
Extortion money, essentially.
Exactly. Protection money on an imperial scale.
And this brings us to a crucial question of perspective. Where exactly is Micah sitting while he watches the northern kingdom get annihilated and, his own kings are scrambling to pay this extortion money?
Right, because he isn't in the capital city of Jerusalem advising the king.
No, he's not an insider.
No, his perspective is entirely different. The text places him in a town called Morsheth.
Okay, more chef.
Yeah, which is located in the Judean Shephelah.
Okay, so for anyone trying to visualize the map of ancient Judah, the geography of the Shephelah is like the key to understanding Micah's entire worldview.
It really is. The Shephelah is this lowland, rolling hill country. It serves as a transitional corridor between the coastal plain along the Mediterranean.
Down at sea level.
Right.
Right.
And the high central mountains where Jerusalem actually sits.
Okay, got it.
Now, the exact archaeological site of Micah's hometown, Morsheth, is actually debated.
Oh, really?
Yeah, many scholars favor a site called Tel Ager Judea, while some recent excavations suggest it might be Azekah.
But the exact pinpoint location probably isn't as important as the region itself. Right?
Exactly. The precise coordinates are less important than the biome, because the coastal plain was the primary highway for invading armies, like the Egyptians coming up from the south or the Assyrians coming down from the north.
So the Shephelah was the strategic buffer zone.
Yes, and because of that, it was heavily fortified.
But it wasn't just a military no man's land, right? It was also the economic engine of Judah.
Far from it, yeah. The Shephelah was the breadbasket.
Okay.
Archaeological surveys of the 8th century BCE show this area was incredibly dense with agrarian settlements. The soil and the climate were just perfect.
So lots of farming?
Tons. The valleys were filled with grain, and the terraced hillsides, they were covered in vineyards and olive groves.
Wow.
Archaeologists have actually uncovered massive industrial complexes here. We're talking hundreds of rock-cut wine presses, olive oil presses, and kilns for making these large storage jars they needed to transport the goods.
So Micah is a local. He's an agrarian borderland resident.
Yeah.
He isn't looking at the Assyrian threat as this abstract political puzzle the way a diplomat up in Jerusalem might.
No, it's very real to him.
He knows the farmers. He knows the local economy. And he knows that if Assyria decides to invade Judah, the Shephelah is the very first place they will destroy.
And tragically, that is exactly what happens.
When does that go down?
In 701 BCE, King Sennacherib of Assyria launches a massive campaign into Judah because King Hezekiah finally stopped paying that tribute.
Bad move.
Very bad move. Sennacherib's army marches right into the Shephelah, and we have tangible, terrifying archaeological proof of what that looked like.
Right. The source highlights this. It's one of the most important archaeological discoveries of the 19th century, right? The Sennacherib of Lachish reliefs.
Yes.
So Lachish was the second most important city in Judah, right? A massive fortress right there in the Shephelah.
Correct. So Sennacherib laid siege to Lachish and just utterly destroyed it.
Wow.
And he considered this victory so significant that when he returned to his capital in Nineveh, he had the entire battle commemorated.
Like painted.
Carved in massive stone panels lining the walls of his palace.
Wow.
These reliefs, which you can actually go see now in the British Museum, they are not symbolic. They are ancient forensic war journalism.
And if you look closely at those carvings, I mean, you see the mechanics of ancient destruction in agonizing detail.
You really do.
You see these massive earthen siege ramps built up against the city walls, and you see Assyrian soldiers pushing these tank-like wooden battering rams up the ramps, while the Judean defenders up on the wall are throwing down torches to try to burn them.
Right, and then the Assyrians have these long ladles they use to pour water on the battering rams to keep them from catching fire.
It's so intense, but the most brutal part of the reliefs is what happens after the wall is breached.
Yes. The carvings show Judean leaders being flayed alive.
Oh, God.
Yeah, their skin literally stripped from their bodies and then impaled on stakes outside the city. It was pure psychological terror.
It's just horrific.
And then you see the local people of the Shephelah families, walking in lines into exile, carrying whatever meager possessions they could fit into a sack.
Knowing that this is the visual reality of Micah is experiencing, I mean, it changes the entire tone of the book's opening.
It frames everything.
Because in Micah, chapter 1, verses 10 through 16, he writes this passage known as the City Lament.
Right.
He goes through a list of local Shephelah towns, including Lachish, and predicts their devastation.
And he uses this really dark gallows humor to do it. It's a series of Hebrew word plays based on the actual names of the towns.
Oh, like what?
Well, for instance, the town of Beth-leafra sounds like the Hebrew word for dust. So he says, in Beth-leafra, roll yourselves in the dust.
Whoa.
Or the town of Shafir, which sounds like beauty, but he says its inhabitants will pass away in nakedness and shame.
So it's a man watching his entire world, his local economy, his friends, being systematically erased by an imperial war machine.
Yes.
You would expect the rest of the book to just be a continuous cry for God to destroy the Assyrians.
You would.
But this brings us to a massive, shocking pivot in the source material.
Right, because Micah actually claims that Assyria is not the root of Judah's problem.
Wait, what?
Yeah. The Assyrian army is just the instrument of consequence. The actual disease causing the impending doom is the internal domestic rot of Judah's own society.
Oh, wow. So we pivot from the terror of foreign invasion directly into a profound socioeconomic critique of ancient gentrification.
Exactly.
So to understand why Micah is so furious with the domestic leaders, we have to look at how land worked in this agrarian economy.
Right.
Because land in ancient Israel wasn't just an asset you bought and sold to, diversify your portfolio.
No, land was nala.
Nala.
Yes, that is the Hebrew term for ancestral inheritance. In the ancient Israelite worldview, the land ultimately belonged to God, and God had leased it to specific families in perpetuity.
Okay, so it's deeply tied to who they are.
Very much so. Your Nalah was tied to your family name, your tribal identity, and your standing in the covenant community. It was the only safety net you had.
So what happens if you lose it?
If you lost your land, you didn't just lose your income. You lost your social identity. You were reduced to a day laborer, or worse, a debt slave.
Okay, I want to challenge this, though. Based on how the source describes the actions of the elites,
Sure.
the wealthy classes in Jerusalem and the local judges in the Shephelah, they are accumulating massive estates. They are buying up property.
Right.
But if a farmer has a bad harvest and has to sell his field, and a wealthy elite legally buys it, isn't that just economics?
What?
Like, if the elites are following the legal contracts, why is Micah condemning them as wicked? How is this different from modern real estate consolidation?
That is precisely the defense the elites would have offered. They would have claimed, hey, we're just engaging in smart business.
Right. It's a free market.
But Micah's analysis exposes the mechanics of how this consolidation actually happened. This wasn't a free market. It was an engineered crisis.
Okay, explain that.
The source refers to this as patronage turned predatory. We have to factor in the Assyrian tribute we discussed earlier.
Right, King Ahaz and King Hezekiah having to pay enormous sums of gold and silver to Assyria.
Exactly. And where do the kings get that wealth?
Oh, taxes.
They tax the agrarian breadbasket, the Shephelah. So the local farmers are suddenly hit with massive, unpayable tax burdens.
Ah, I see where this is going.
Right. To pay the royal tax, a farmer has to borrow silver or seed grain from the wealthy elite in Jerusalem or the local magistrates.
And I'm guessing the interest rates weren't great.
They were extortionate. One bad harvest or a raid by passing army, and the farmer defaults.
And when he defaults, the wealthy elite who lent him the money takes him to court.
Exactly. And who sits in the ancient court?
The judges.
The local elders and judges who meet at the city gates to adjudicate disputes. But Micah reveals in chapter 3 that these judges take bribes.
Wow. So the system is rigged.
The entire legal system has been compromised by the wealthy class. The judge rules in favor of the elite creditor, forecloses on the peasant's nullah, and the elite just adds another field to his growing, massive estate.
That's infuriating.
This is why Micah 2.1-2 says they covet fields and seize them, and houses and take them away. They oppress a man and his house, a man and his inheritance.
So they're weaponizing the legal system.
Yes.
It is entirely legal on paper, but it is fundamentally predatory in practice.
That's the perfect way to phrase it.
The people who are supposed to protect the vulnerable, the patrons, the judges, the rulers, are using their authority to systematically strip the poor of their only means of survival.
And Micah's language to describe this process is deliberately horrifying. He doesn't use sterile economic terms like foreclosure or consolidation.
No, he goes hard.
He really does. In chapter 3, verses 1 through 4, he addresses the heads of Jacob and the rulers of the house of Israel, and he describes them as cannibals.
Cannibals.
Yeah. He says they tear the skin from off my people and their flesh from off their bones, who eat the flesh of my people and flay their skin from off them and break their bones in pieces and chop them up like meat in a pot.
That is visceral imagery.
Bro.
Tearing the skin. Wait, that actually echoes the Assyrian terror tactics on the Lachish reliefs, right, where they flayed people alive.
Exactly. You nailed it. Micah is essentially saying, you fear the Assyrians because they tear the skin off our soldiers. Look in the mirror. You elites are doing the exact same thing to your own poor through your corrupt court system.
Man, that is a devastating indictment.
It is. And it taps heavily into the honor-shame dynamics of the ancient Near East.
Right, because honor was everything.
Honor was the primary social currency. By standing in public and delivering this searing satire, Micah is actively stripping the elites of their respectability.
Because they probably thought they were the good guys.
Oh, they definitely thought they were the honorable pillars of society because they held the deeds to all the land. And Micah publicly names their actions as butchery.
This brings up a critical point about how Micah views human nature and sin. For you listening and trying to process this theological worldview, Micah's presenting a concept of socially embedded sin.
And this is a major paradigm shift for many modern readers.
Yeah, because we often default to a highly individualized view of morality, right? Like sin is a private failing, a personal lie, a bad thought.
Right, but Micah demonstrates that sin can be structural. It can be built into the very architecture of a society.
The institutions themselves can be sinful.
Exactly. The court system at the city gates, the taxation policies in Jerusalem, the debt lending practices, they were all functioning exactly as they were engineered to function.
Which was to protect the powerful and extract wealth from the vulnerable.
Right. For Micah, institutionalized injustice is not merely a political grievance. It is a fundamental theological betrayal of the covenant.
Because God had explicitly commanded Israel in the Torah to protect the vulnerable, right?
Yes.
Like not to charge exorbitant interest to their brothers and to ensure that the land remained with the families.
The entire social fabric was supposed to be a reflection of God's character.
But since the human courts are entirely rigged and corrupt, the exploited farmer has literally nowhere to go for justice.
Nowhere on earth, anyway.
Right, so God decides to bypass the human courts completely.
And this is a brilliant structural transition in the book. Since the earthly justice system has failed, God initiates a cosmic justice system.
Okay, I love this part.
In chapters 6 and 7, Micah introduces a specific literary genre known in biblical scholarship as the rib.
Spelled R-I-B, the covenant lawsuit.
Yes. The rib is a formal legal proceeding patterned after ancient Near Eastern suzerain vassal treaties.
What's a suzerain vassal treaty?
It's a treaty between a greater king, the suzerain, and a lesser king, the vassal. When a lesser king broke a treaty, the greater king would issue a formal legal indictment.
Ah, okay.
So in Micah 6, God is the plaintiff, bringing a lawsuit against the nation of Israel, the defendant.
And because it's a cosmic dispute, human judges are completely inadequate. So in verses 1 and 2, God calls the mountains and the enduring foundations of the earth to act as the jury.
Which is such a powerful image.
It is, but why the mountains?
Well, because in ancient cosmology, the mountains were the oldest witnesses.
Oh, that makes sense.
Right. They stood there when the covenant was first made. They have watched generations of corruption play out in the valleys below.
So God stands before this geologic jury. But his opening statement isn't a list of Israel's crimes, is it?
No, it's not. It is a poignant, almost heartbreaking recitation of his own faithfulness.
Wow.
In verses 3 through 5, God says, "O my people, what have I done to you? How have I wearied you? Answer me."
He's pleading with them.
He is. He reminds them of the Exodus, how he brought them out of the slave camps of Egypt. He reminds them of the leaders he provided, Moses, Aaron, and Miriam.
He is essentially asking, look at my track record of liberation and provision. What on earth did I do to justify your absolute betrayal of my laws?
Exactly.
And the way that people respond to this lawsuit is one of the most revealing moments in the entire text.
It really exposes where their hearts are.
Because instead of collapsing in repentance, they try to settle out of court. They try to bribe God.
Yes. This is where Micah exposes the absurdity of their empty religion. In verses 6 and 7, the people respond to the indictment by throwing out escalating offers of religious sacrifice.
Like what?
They ask, "With what shall I come before the Lord? Shall I come before him with burnt offerings, with calves a year old?"
Which, to be fair, is standard protocol.
It is. But then the panic sets in, and the offers become hyperinflated. They say, "Will the Lord be pleased with thousands of rams, with 10,000s of rivers of oil?"
Rivers of oil. It is completely absurd.
Totally absurd.
It's like a corrupt CEO getting caught in a multi-billion-dollar fraud scheme, standing before a federal judge and offering to buy the judge 1,000 courthouses to make the charges go away.
That's a perfect analogy. The psychology here is staggering. They view God as a divine extortionist.
Right. They think he operates just like the corrupt elites do.
Exactly. They think he just wants a bigger cut of the profits.
Yeah.
If they could just offer enough livestock and oil, they believe they can buy him off and go right back to tearing the skin off the poor.
That's so dark.
And then the escalation reaches its most horrifying logical conclusion. They ask, "Shall I give my firstborn for my transgression, the fruit of my body for the sin of my soul?"
Oh my God. They are casually offering child sacrifice as a legal settlement.
Yes. It shows that their religious worldview has become entirely untethered from any moral reality.
They have completely divorced liturgy from life.
To them, the temple and its sacrifices are merely a mechanical apparatus for appeasing an angry deity.
And this fundamentally misunderstands God's character.
Completely. God doesn't want their stuff. He owns the cattle on 1,000 hills, as the Psalms say. He wants their character.
And that answer is delivered in what is undoubtedly the most famous passage in the book, Micah 6.8.
Yes.
He has shown you, O mortal, what is good, and what does the Lord require of you? To act justly, and to love mercy, and to walk humbly with your God.
Such a powerful verse.
It is.
Yeah.
And if you have spent any time around modern religious communities, you have seen this verse. It's on coffee mugs, it's printed on canvas tote bags.
Right, it's everywhere.
But when you rip it out of this terrifying courtroom context, it loses its teeth. It just becomes a cozy platitude.
It really does. But in its original context, Micah 6.8 is God's definitive rejection of their bribes. It is the legal minimum for a redeemed society.
So to understand how radical this demand was, we need to look closely at the mechanics of the three Hebrew terms used here.
Let's do it.
The first requirement is to do justice. The Hebrew word is mishpo.
Tishpo.
How did mishpah actually function in an 8th century Judean village? Because this isn't just about feeling a vague sense of fairness, is it?
Not at all. Mishpo refers to the concrete establishment of an equitable legal and social order in the public sphere.
Okay.
It means action. In a village context, doing mishpah meant that when you sat as an elder at the city gate to judge a property dispute, you absolutely refused the bribe from the wealthy landowner.
You actually do the right thing.
Right, and you ruled in favor of the indebted farmer to ensure he kept his ancestral land. It means designing your economic practices so that the vulnerable are protected from exploitation.
So when God demands mishpah, he is directly outlawing the predatory gentrification we discussed earlier.
Exactly. You cannot substitute rivers of oil for a rigged court system.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay, the second requirement is to love mercy. The Hebrew word is east.
East is perhaps one of the most untranslatable, profound words in the biblical lexicon
Really? Why is it so hard to translate?
because it's so layered. It is often rendered as steadfast love, mercy, or loving kindness, but it is deeply rooted in the concept of covenant loyalty.
Covenant loyalty.
Yeah, it is a loyal, fierce commitment to the mutual obligations within a community.
Yeah.
It means acting toward your neighbor with the same protective, enduring devotion that God has shown toward Israel.
That's a high bar.
And notice, Micah doesn't just say dist, he says love east.
You have to actually desire the well-being of the people around you, not just grudgingly tolerate them.
Exactly. You have to want it. And the third pillar is to walk humbly with your God.
Right.
The root word here is av, which implies modesty, lowliness, and an ongoing posture of dependence. It is the active rejection of arrogance.
So if you are an elite landowner, walking humbly means recognizing that your wealth and your power are not absolute.
Right.
They are delegated to you by God, and you are entirely accountable to Him for how you use them. You don't have autonomy to crush others just because you have the leverage to do so.
When you synthesize these three concepts, mishpo, east, and on of God is presenting a total holistic moral vision.
It's all-encompassing.
He's telling the nation that no amount of religious ritual can ever compensate for the abuse of human beings. True worship is an equitable society.
But as the source notes, introducing Micah 6.8 here creates an immense literary and theological tension.
It really does.
Because if that is the standard of the covenant, the current leadership in Jerusalem has failed spectacularly.
They failed the test completely.
The kings, the judges, the wealthy class, they are guilty of the lawsuit, which means the judgment is coming.
It's unavoidable now.
Assyria is going to burn the Shephelah, and eventually Babylon is going to destroy Jerusalem itself.
Yep.
So, if the current power structures are completely irredeemable, who is going to lead the people? Is there any future at all?
And this is where Micah transitions from the mechanics of judgment to an astonishing vision of the future.
A pivot to hope.
Exactly. The book structurally pivots to contrast the corrupt leaders of the present with the coming shepherd king of the future.
And Micah starts this contrast by looking at his own profession, right? Because he wasn't the only prophet operating in Judah.
No, the religious establishment was full of professionals claiming to speak for God.
But the mechanics of ancient prophecy were often deeply corrupt.
Very much so. In chapter 3, Micah exposes the mercenary prophets.
Mercenary prophets, I love that term.
It's accurate.
Yeah.
These were men who treated divine revelation as a commodity. They were essentially spiritual yes-men for hire.
Wow.
Micah says of them, who cry peace when they have something to eat, but declare war against him who puts nothing into their mouths.
So if the corrupt landowner pays the prophet a fee, the prophet stands up and declares, God is with you, you are blessed, your wealth is a sign of divine favor.
Right. They provide religious cover for economic crime.
But if a poor person challenges them, they use their religious authority to curse them.
Exactly. And against this backdrop of money-driven, compromised religion, Micah makes a radical claim about his own authority in Micah 3.8.
What does he say?
This is actually a foundational text for understanding prophetic pneumatology, the theology of the Spirit. Micah says, "But as for me, I am filled with power, with the Spirit of the Lord, and with justice and might, to declare to Jacob his transgression and to Israel his sin."
Wow. So he defines true prophetic authority not as popularity, not as proximity to the king, and not as charisma.
No. True authority is the Spirit-given courage to stand in the public square and tell powerful people that they are wrong.
And because Micah is willing to speak the devastating truth about the present corruption, he is uniquely trusted to reveal the truth about the future hope.
Exactly. He introduces a vision of redemption that entirely bypasses the corrupt systems of his day.
Which brings us to a fascinating literary mystery in the text regarding the Zion Oracle.
Ah, yes. This is a great part of the study.
So in Micah chapter 4, verses 1 through 5, the text suddenly lifts its eyes from the mud and the blood of the impending invasion.
Right.
It describes a future where the mountain of the Lord's house will be established as the highest of the mountains. Nations will stream to it, not to conquer, but to learn God's ways.
It's a beautiful image.
And it contains that famous, sweeping promise that they shall beat their swords into plowshares and their spears into pruning hooks. Nation shall not lift up sword against nation, neither shall they learn war anymore.
It is a vision of total global disarmament. It is the ultimate counter-narrative to the Assyrian war machine.
Right, where Assyria brings battering rams to destroy, God's future kingdom brings agricultural tools to cultivate life.
But the mystery is that this exact same passage, almost word for word, appears in the book of Isaiah, chapter 2, verses 2 through 4.
Wait, really?
Yes. And Isaiah is prophesying in the capital city of Jerusalem at the exact same time Micah is prophesying down in the Shephelah.
So how did the exact same text end up in both books? Did Micah copy Isaiah or did Isaiah copy Micah?
Well, biblical scholars have debated this for centuries.
I bet. What's the consensus?
The prevailing consensus in modern scholarship, which the source supports, is that neither prophet plagiarized the other.
Okay, so where did it come from?
Instead, this was likely a shared Zion tradition. It was an independent, well-known prophetic anthem circulating among the faithful in Judah during this era of extreme imperial terror.
Oh, that's fascinating. Like a hymn or a poem they all knew.
Exactly. Both prophets incorporated it into their scrolls because it perfectly captured the ultimate eschatological hope, the final destiny of the world.
But the way Micah uses it is very pointed, isn't it?
Very.
Because he has just spent 3 chapters predicting the total destruction of Jerusalem because of the elites. Now he says, yes, the current Jerusalem will fall, but God's ultimate plan is a renewed Zion that brings instruction and peace to the whole world.
But that raises a big question.
How does that happen?
Right. Who is going to enact this peace if the line of Davidic kings sitting on the throne right now kings like Ahaz, are cowards paying off the Assyrians.
Right. The current monarchy is irredeemable.
So God bypasses the power center of Jerusalem entirely. This leads us to the Christological peak of the book in Micah chapter 5, verses
Oh.
2 through 5.
Ah, the Bethlehem prophecy.
Yes. Micah prophesies the origin of the new ruler.
Let me read it. But you, O Bethlehem Ephrathah, who are too little to be among the clans of Judah, for you shall come forth for me one who's to be ruler in Israel, whose coming forth is from of old, from ancient days.
The geographical subversion here is brilliant.
Why?
Because Bethlehem is a tiny, seemingly insignificant agrarian village, very similar to Micah's own hometown.
Oh, wait.
But critically, Bethlehem is the ancestral birthplace of King David.
I
By pointing to Bethlehem, God is essentially hitting the reset button on the entire Davidic dynasty.
Wow.
He is bypassing the centuries of accumulated corruption in the Jerusalem palace and going all the way back to the humble pastoral origins of the kingship.
And the terminology Micah uses for this new ruler deliberately contrasts with the leaders he condemned back in chapter 3.
Yes, it does.
The current elites were described as butchers, tearing the skin off the flock. So how does Micah describe the coming king?
He says, "And he shall stand and shepherd his flock in the strength of the Lord." The Hebrew word is raphe, to shepherd. Right. And he will rule with a shevet, a word that means a rod or a scepter, implying both royal authority and disciplinary protection for the sheep.
So this new ruler will not extract wealth from the vulnerable to enrich himself.
No, he will use his divine strength to protect the vulnerable from the wolves.
And this specific text became the bedrock for later messianic expectations in Judaism, didn't it?
Absolutely. The source traces this thread directly into the New Testament.
Right. In the Gospel of Matthew chapter 2, when the Magi arrive in Jerusalem looking for the newborn king of the Jews, King Herod consults the chief priests and scribes.
And they don't have to guess where the Messiah will be born.
No, they immediately quote this exact text from Micah 5 to point the Magi to Bethlehem.
It's a direct link.
Mm-hmm.
Early Christians saw Jesus as the direct historical fulfillment of Micah's shepherd king, the ultimate ruler who embodies humility, justice, and peace.
The continuity of that prophetic thread is really profound.
It is. But we must also ground this back in the 8th century BCE for Micah's original listeners.
Right, because they are the ones hearing this for the first time.
Exactly. They hear this incredible promise of a future shepherd king. But they also know that tomorrow, the Assyrian army is going to arrive and burn their vineyards.
That is a terrifying reality.
So how does the covenant community survive the horrific gap between the present judgment and the future hope?
Which brings us to the final major theological concept we need to synthesize today, the theology of the remnant.
Yes. The concept of the remnant is basically the survival mechanism of the covenant. In Hebrew, the word is shi'orit.
Shi'orit.
Right. Throughout the book, Micah repeatedly assures his audience that total destruction is never God's final word.
That must have been comforting.
It was. In chapters 2, 4, 5, and 7, he promises that a shi'orit will be preserved, God will gather the lame, the outcasts, and the afflicted, and he will forge them into a strong nation.
I want to make sure we define this clearly, though, because when empires sweep through a territory, the people who survive aren't usually the righteous or the humble.
No, usually not.
The survivors are usually the wealthy elites who could afford to bribe the invading army or buy safe passage to Egypt, or, just the lucky ones who manage to hide in a cave.
Right.
Is Micah suggesting that God is magically shielding a pure subgroup of people from the physical violence of the Assyrians?
No, that's a really important distinction. The theology of the remnant is not about dodging physical hardship. The remnant isn't defined by their luck or their bank accounts. They are defined by a purification process.
A purification process? How so?
The impending judgment, the exile, the loss of the land, the destruction of the corrupt temple system. It all acts as a crucible. The shi'orites are the disciplined community who survive this systemic collapse with their faith intact. They are the ones who realize that the only way forward is to embrace the ethics of Micah 6.8.
So when the institutions of power burn down, the remnant are the ones who rebuild society based on mishpat, east, and on of, justice, covenant, loyalty, and humility.
Exactly. So they are the faithful nucleus carrying the genetic code of the covenant forward into the future, waiting for the shepherd king.
That creates a massive, overarching, redemptive arc.
Really ties the whole biblical narrative together.
You start with the promises to Abraham in Genesis. You move to the establishment of the law at Sinai. The kings and the elites corrupt that law, leading Micah to issue the cosmic rib, the lawsuit. The lawsuit results in the Babylonian exile, but God preserves this faithful remnant through the exile to eventually receive the Messiah.
And this brings us back to the structural genius of the Book of the 12.
Oh, right, the minor prophets.
Micah's placement among the minor prophets is not accidental. He sits canonically between the warnings of Amos and Hosea and the later post-exilic prophets like Haggai and Zechariah.
So he's like a bridge.
Exactly. He takes the unyielding demand for social justice from Amos, marries it to the passionate plea for covenant fidelity from Hosea, and synthesizes them into a theology that sustains the remnant through the darkest centuries of their history.
Which makes the conclusion of Micah's scroll incredibly powerful.
It's a beautiful ending.
Because after 7 chapters of woe, of weeping over destroyed cities, of exposing corrupt judges and false prophets, the book does not end on a note of despair or unyielding anger.
It ends with a stunning doxology in Micah 7:19-20.
Who is a God like you, pardoning iniquity and passing over transgression for the remnant of his inheritance? He does not retain his anger forever because he delights in steadfast love.
He delights in steadfast love.
That is it.
Yes. God demands est from his people in 6.8 because he fundamentally embodies ist himself.
That's amazing.
The book concludes in absolute awe of God's capacity for mercy. It validates Micah's honest grief over the destruction of his beloved Shephelah, but it anchors that grief in the unshakable promise of God's character.
It proves that God's justice, his absolute refusal to let the powerful elite crush the poor forever, and his mercy, they are not contradictory traits.
No, they are two expressions of the exact same covenant loyalty.
Right. He judges the oppressors out of justice, and he preserves the remnant out of mercy.
If we look at the totality of Chris R. Velasquez's survey, the core takeaway is that biblical faith cannot be compartmentalized into private spiritual feelings.
It has to be lived out.
Exactly. How a society structures its real estate market, how it runs its courts, how it treats its most vulnerable workers, these are fundamental metrics of its relationship with God.
Wow.
True religion marries structural public equity with deep interpersonal loyalty, while acknowledging our total dependence on a power greater than ourselves.
And it does all of this while trusting that the ultimate authority will not look like the coercive empires of the world, but like the shepherd king from Bethlehem. We started this deep dive by talking about how easy it is to treat ancient texts like a serene, quiet, stained glass window.
Yeah, and Micah definitely shatters that window.
Completely. This is a gritty, demanding, and profoundly historical text that searches the deepest flaws of human society. As we conclude, I want to leave you with a final thought, a way to map this 2,800-year-old framework onto the world you see when you walk out your door today.
I love this.
Imagine if Micah, the agrarian prophet from the Shephelah, were walking through your city right now. If he was auditing your local real estate markets, looking at your corporate structures, reviewing the dockets of your legal systems, and evaluating your religious institutions, what place names would he use to write his dark gallows humor lament?
That's a sobering thought.
If God were to initiate a cosmic covenant lawsuit against the systemic architecture of our current world, who would be called to testify at the city gates? And most importantly, if the immutable standard is still Micah 6.8, to actively establish justice, to fiercely love mercy, and to walk without arrogance, what exactly would the verdict be?
Wow.
Keep that in mind the next time you see those words on a coffee mug. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive.